Welcome to the Genius Alchemist podcast. I'm your host, Sarah McBride, and in today's episode, I had the absolute privilege of speaking to an old mentor and coach of mine, Brandon Campbell. Brandon, first and foremost, is a father to 6 wonderful children, a husband to his soulmate, and he's a full-time nomad. He's a master coach and an expert in optimizing and expanding the human experience. Over the past 20 plus years, Brandon has personally coached hundreds of executives and high-level entrepreneurs, and he's reached millions more through his online presence and his media appearances. During that time, and with his ongoing commitment to perpetual learning, he has developed a coaching approach that has had tremendous power to create seemingly miraculous transformations for people in their lives. He has supported clients in creating permanent lifestyle transformations after decades of previously failed attempts, resolving enduring chronic pain, and doing things that their doctors told them that they'd never do again, growing businesses beyond their wildest dreams and creating generational wealth, deepening relationships and allowing them to naturally conceive children after years of trying. Brandon treats each of his clients as the unique and powerful individuals that they are, and he loves opening them up to the limitless potential that exists within them. We cover all things from the field, the void, how we can tap into energy, intuition, and making the client the magician of their own life. So, let's get to it. Hi, Brandon. It's so exciting to have you on because from what I've already said in the bio, I've known you for 8 or 9 years. You've had a huge impact on my life. You've been an incredible coach and a support in my journey. So I think it's amazing that we can just share everything today on how you've impacted me, why you've impacted me, the way you work, and how similar it is to I work, and how it flows from my last podcast where I was talking about empowerment and some experience that have been not so good experiences with coaches and mentors, and then some incredible experiences. So yeah, would you like to talk a little bit about yourself? Because we've mentioned you're a bit of a nomad, and I think everyone would be interested to see how you've manifested this lifestyle for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me, Sarah. It's been such an honor to get to know you more over the years and see your journey and kind of where you've just overcome so many things that the external world was placing on you, and how you've, really just come into your own more and more. So it's an absolute honor to be here, and super excited to have this discussion. In terms of, some of the unique elements. So the 2 things that usually gain the most interest from my bio are 6 kids. What? Like how to have 6 kids and run a business and do other things. So my wife and I do have 6 kids. We have 5 biological kids and 1 adopted son, and all the blessings that come along with that. It's an exciting life because we have young children, right? So my oldest is 9, will be 10 in January, and then all the way down to a newborn. So it's not many people have kids that many and that young. So it's a very fun experience. And then the nomadic side, we love travel for, all of our lives. My wife and I, early on in our relationship, had tested it out a little bit and traveled with our 2 oldest kids. And then ultimately made the move to do it full time this last summer. And so we travel all across the United States here domestically where I live, and are constantly in another beautiful environment. So this behind me is Central California. We're in wine country right now. So this is a big, beautiful tree behind me, but there are vineyards and stuff all around. And we just recently came from the California redwoods and coastal redwood territory, which, Sarah, if you haven't been, you'll have to go sometime. There were a couple of groves that we were walking through where you definitely came to mind, and the connection that you and I both share with nature was very powerful there. So
well, it's just so you know, it's dark here, and it's been
exactly.
There's been rain all day. It's dark outside, hence why I've got all the light on. So it looks amazing where you are.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a little bit about kind of our existing life. We had wanted to do it for a while, and just as you said, continuously creating more and more of the opportunities that we want for ourselves, right? My wife and I in our relationship, and also experiential learning for our kids, right? We don't really ascribe to the traditional model of schooling and things like that. For some things we'll probably talk about, just the conditioned behaviors and things that you and I have had to overcome, honestly, about, the way that we're taught to lead life and to create, work and those sorts of things. So that's what we're doing now. And again, we love it, despite the chaos, right? But having 6 kids is chaos alone. So it's not that big a deal to have the full-time travel alongside of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, to be honest, well, as you know, I haven't got any kids, but it sounds amazing, the lifestyle and the travel, and that connection to nature. And for me, animals, nature, and so it's something I'd love to explore more of. And I had an astrology reading yesterday, which actually talks about my more travel. And I have been doing more retreats and things like that, but there is some more travel in there. So I'll see where that takes me and that unfolds. The work that you're doing now, because I know you've worked with high level execs, CEOs, and for me, your work, it's like being in an ayahuasca journey. It's its own, it's so unique. And if you remember, I think it was 2020, maybe late 2020, and I got some of the girls together, and you did like a women's circle, and the feedback that come off that as well was phenomenal, because it was, the intuition, the presence that you're able to hold in that space was able to kind of catalyze healings within everyone in that group. And I know for me, it's interesting because it was early 2020 that we reconnected, and I see we were always in contact, but I seen that you were launching something around health, and I gained a lot of weight. I was lethargic. I didn't feel good about myself. And, if you remember, I felt like it was getting out of control. And then that's why I signed up to work with you again and be focused on health optimization. And, it wasn't anything like what I expected it to be like. I was expecting, take this, eat that. And it was all about like the inner and the internal world. And, and that created a huge shift for me, like significant weight loss, energy, shifting image, personal image, wanting to become more visible. Lots and lots of different things happened from that work. And then I know, we did some work later on in the women's circle. I'd like you to kind of discuss a little bit about that, because to me that work is similar in the way in which I work, in the presence and the space holding and the intuition, which is the complete opposite from disempowering someone or being really specific and directive and this is what you have to do, which there's a lot out there, as we know, and there's a lot of modalities that teach this is the formulaic steps, this is the way you have to do things, and then you get people parroting these kinds of formulas, and then for me that takes you away from what you inherently know, the soul's wisdom. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about that so we could explore that further.
No, I'd be honored. So the thing that's very fun about the way that I've kind of distilled down some of my coaching approaches, I've intentionally removed the constraints that were placed on me in previous modalities and practitioner trainings and all of the different things that I've done, and more really opened up to what it is that is sitting before me, right? Like a unique, powerful individual who is not yet tapped in fully to what they're truly capable of, right? And it really doesn't matter the client or the level of success that they've experienced. I always know with certainty that there's more, right? There's more available for them and within them. And the certainty that I have around that, I feel like is a really powerful component, right? Because people feel that, people honor that, and people know that it's not a fabrication, right? It's not just saying it from okay, this is an esoteric belief, or a strategy that can help you because positive thinking has some benefit, right? It's a deep inner knowing for me, right? Where I really do believe in human potential, and I've seen it play out so many times that it is like really in that place where I have this belief in people, right? Inherent. And so coming from that space, I feel like makes a big difference, because then what I'm ultimately doing is just letting my own intuition be the guide. But beyond that, being so present with someone that I can feel what they're feeling and associate to those feelings in some level. So that regardless, right, we are here across the world from one another. We've always done our work remotely, right, across the world from one another. And despite that, you and I have a deep connection because of the work that we've done and the presence that we've shared, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the part that's really fun, is really honoring that connection that we do share with everyone around us. And sometimes for people like us who are more tapped in, you have to be, methodical about that, because the collective kind of feel often is not the most supportive of growth. Now, that being said, with the approach itself, what I'm always looking for are those like deep yearnings, right? The things that you and I talked about in our early work together that were so pressing and so real for you all those years ago, when you had no idea really about the how, right? You'd seen through some of your consulting background, all of the business results that could come from the strategic level thinking that you had, but then you had this much deeper spiritual side to yourself, and recognize like there is some level of crossover available here. And how can you stay true to the spiritual side and what that represents, while also having solid business practice and principle, and again, not making it be just straight formulaic, right? And I think for both of us, that's something that we both found, and it's often difficult, because the highest level work that I do with people is not something that's easy to just get started, right? Because it's not something that's easy to describe in words, right? It's kind of got to be experienced, right? As you know. And so for me, what I found is that it works really well to have something that people are already seeking, right? That I know I can provide very direct benefit in, and then develop a relationship, start building momentum, not, because I have the perfect system for creating health or relieving pain, but because I have experienced those things myself personally, and with so many clients now, that I understand like there are common themes and common elements that will get us started. And once we get started, then it will allow us to uncover, right, the things that are beneath the real external, like kind of desires that people have, that allow for the depth of work to take place. And then before long, like you said, we started out in 2020 with a very explicit outcome, right? You wanted to improve your energy, you wanted to improve your cognitive function, you wanted to improve the way that you experienced your body and how you had that relationship with your body. And all of those things were taking place, but they were also uncovering a much greater beneath the surface, right? Like sort of work that was available, right? So I found that if we can start with something that's very explicit, where people know like, hey, I do want this, right? I want to improve this area. If they're in pain, it's relief of that pain, right? And in most instances, there's always some element there, right? Like, the work that you do as well, people are in pain in some way, right? And what we're inviting them to do is acknowledge that some of the pain that they experience is a choice, right?
Absolutely.
So as we move forward, that's the thing that's fun, is like, hey, the pain that you're experiencing, right, is being participated in, right? You're participating in the continued experience of that pain. Now, it doesn't mean that you've been the cause of it, right, all the time. However, when we understand that level of participation, then we gain influence over it. Then we have autonomy. And that's where it really gets fun, because then it comes down to very simple shifts that take place, and never me being the one who's like, hey, this is what you need to do. Like you said, Sarah, where it is, there's less directives from me and more exploration in my work, right? I love to explore deeply with the person who's before me, so that they can uncover in themselves and have those moments and flashes of insight where it's like, wait, like that, I felt something when I said that, right? I felt something deeper that's there, that's like a little pull, it's a tug, right? And I'm connecting with people in those moments. So then in my mind, I'm kind of like acknowledging like that had some weight to it, right? We're touching on not the tip of the iceberg anymore, but that 95% below that's there in the unconscious, right? That's there in the identity that may have nothing to do with the person that I'm here connecting with, right?
Yeah.
Likely has to do with their upbringing, their conditioning, right? A lot of those things that's like, hey, I adopted this way of thought or this way of being from my caregivers, from my professors, from my school teachers, from the practitioners that I trained with. And then it's like, okay, how many shoulds, supposed tos, have tos are showing up for you,
Yeah.
right?
It's
If,
like, it's
go
like
ahead.
that. It's a question I always ask myself or others, like, are you fully you yet?
Right.
Because what you've just said, I see people, and the people that just become almost like mimic the people around them or what they've learned, and then they talk about that and it's not fully them. And I know that was one of my biggest lessons to overcome, because my intuition was always my strongest aspect of myself. That was always the thing that I was tuned into, like the intuitive part of me and the knowingness. But I was too busy, probably because of a corporate background. I was too busy trying to fit in and come up with scientific, logical explanations of why I knew the things that I knew. So, you know, what you're saying, it is where the people start to mimic and they're around others and they're just conditioning. It's not actually them. And obviously it's a big journey finding what is myself and who am I. But even just starting with that intuition, I mean, and I know I said this before we started to record, but you were the person that hands down empowered me the most out of anyone that I've worked with, because you helped me to trust that intuition. And that's the bit that, you know, in my work is the most powerful part of my work, the intuition and trusting that. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge that as well.
Well, I mean, I deeply appreciate that. That's pretty much the highest praise that I can receive because of the type of work that I do. And you know that because you do a similar type of work, right? It's really amazing when you can just step fully into who you are, right? Like, and that's the part that's very difficult for people, is because of things like the achievement-based paradigm, where it's like, well, you should be doing this, or this is the path to create the results. This is what everyone else is doing, so you need to fall in line and do it. Or even beyond that, right? Like you said, well, I learned something from someone who has more experience than I have, right? Whether it's life experience or hours of practice or those sorts of things. So I need to model their behavior, do exactly what they do in order to get the similar outcome. And I think both you and I have experienced this at times where there is some amazing practitioner work out there, and some people that we've learned from who have had a great impact in terms of skill sets, tools, things like that we have developed. And often, because they're working within a framework, there is like a point where they can only take it so far, right? Because they're trying to stay within like something that's a model that they've been the creator of, and then allowing for something outside of that is difficult. It's inherently more difficult when you've kind of already drank the Kool-Aid, right? We both studied NLP, right? NLP has some very powerful technologies available within it, but most of the NLP people that I've trained with, and some of them were even creators of the technology and things like that, are not who I would look to in terms of like, okay, this person represents health and vitality and the other things that are very high priority for me in life, right? It's like, so where's the disconnect there, right? If this technology really is delivering on the promises that it has, why do any NLP practitioners struggle with things in their own life? And granted, all coaches and people who are supporting others absolutely need their own coach, right? If you don't have your own coach and you're in the coaching profession, then there's some level of, you know, distrust with what you're doing, in my opinion, right? We've talked about that before. And ultimately, like for you, you are so powerful, right? And we both have seen that, we've acknowledged it. And your growth for me has been most amazing to witness when you've really leaned in on not having to explain it, right?
Yeah.
Where I come from a similar background, right? Like I was a science major in college and went
Yeah.
through and went that route. So I love like seeing the science and seeing a lot of the science catch up, honestly, to
Mm.
this work, right? We're seeing more and more of science catch up to esoteric work that has been done for millennia, right? And now
Absolutely.
it's like, oh, we see quantum
Yeah.
physics is a real thing, right? We see like heart coherence, brain coherence, all of these things that are now being studied and validated by science, that have been going on in Eastern modalities and things like that for a long, long time. But in any case, for you, when you just let go and you're like, I'm just going to serve, right? I'm here
Mm.
to serve people at the highest level. And that's the only thing that matters. If they get phenomenal results and have a life that they love and lean into that and don't rely on force and willpower and having to do things in a certain way, but instead just lean in, like, where do I feel the most aligned? Where do I feel the
Mm.
best on a daily basis? And when I'm in service, what does that look like? What does that feel like? How can I know that? And when you do that, like the work that you do with clients is unlike anything else that people have experienced, right? And you've heard that feedback externally many, many, many times. But what's more important than the external validation from the client like side and what they experience is internally you just leaning in more. You just knowing, like,
Mm.
if I lead in this way, right? Which is more not from a driver's seat leadership standpoint where it's like, hey, everyone's behind me on the bus going
Yeah.
along as I make the turns, but lead by calling out the leader that's there
Yeah.
before you in each of your coaching clients and
Absolutely.
acknowledging like, hey, the path that you're on in the way that you do things is far beyond where I could be at what you're excellent at, right?
Mm.
And I don't have any problem with that. My ego is not challenged by the people that I work with as coaching clients having exponentially better results in certain areas of their life because that's their path and not
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah.
And that's where you are as well, right? It's like I want every single person that I work with to far exceed anything that they had previously thought possible in any area that is that lean in. This is for me, right? Like
Yeah.
this is the life that I love. And this is the type of result that isn't for the external world, right? It's
Mm.
great to have external validation, but it's never the impetus for continuing that work or that
Yeah.
journey.
I mean, I've always said this, like when I did actually used to love working in corporate for this up until a point. And then I
Mhm.
just, what happens is I just then hated it. I just got to the point of like, wow,
Yeah.
hate it
Yeah.
now, can't deal with it. But then this way, people would say, you're being a bit of a workaholic here. But
Mhm.
what they don't understand is it is because I love the work.
Mhm.
So it's not like I'm chasing the money or, I'm burning out and because I'm in my masculine energy and all this. It's because I love the work. And yeah, the feedback I get, the results I get, but the knowing when you see people step into that space and then they're like, I never thought this was possible. You've changed my life. And then you see the lives changing. It's like, how can you not love that? How can you not waking up and you get to do what you love? There's nothing boring about it. You're not tired. You enjoy doing it and then you get them results, that to me is that is the work. And I know we both do that where we empower people to really step into alignment with the thing that they're born to do in this lifetime. And then ultimately, how can we be in competition when we've all got different skill sets? To me, we've all got something that's a little bit special that someone else hasn't got, and we just have to find that. And then when we all tune into that and tap into that, imagine the collective, like if everyone was tuned into that and how much
Mhm.
a better place the world would be. So yeah, like I hear what you're saying and totally resonate and agree.
Well, again, it's fun because it's so rare, right? Like in this space to really have a deep understanding and appreciation for what we're talking about. And, naturally, the people who are also kind of outside the box a little bit, right? Where they do this work or they're invested in like their continued growth and expansion overall, but feel like there's a little bit too much constraint in the world that they're kind of operating in. I think that's the part that's really fun about this discussion is this is kind of like an open invitation to really thinking through, like, where are you trying to be like someone else, or, allowing yourself to be guided by something outside of yourself, right? Because most often those are the things that require force and willpower, in my experience, right? If you're trying to force yourself to do something, and the funny thing is now the most cutting edge neuroscience on a lot of this is recognizing that there are certain brain centers that are responsible for willpower, right? You can actually grow the neuro chemical and neurological connections for willpower in your brain, right? Like, you can get better at willpower, right, as a tool. However, in my experience, that's only useful to get you started, right? It's like to overcome inertia, to like get moving, it can be useful, right? To have that sometimes extrinsic motivation of like, well, I really do want to experience more of this, or I really don't want to have this in my life anymore. It's no longer tolerable. That's where willpower can assert itself and get you in motion. Then beyond that, in my experience, it's how can we lean in to those things that you mentioned, right? In your work and in my work, coaching, these types of conversations are generative. Yes, they require a lot of presence and a lot of energetic investment. And the more that you invest in that, it's like legitimately part of the torus field of energy that we exist as is, higher vibration overall, right? And we know these things in quantum physics are validated now, and that there are upward spirals available to us on kind of the energetic spectrum, where when we're embodying those more with the energy that we represent, we do have higher levels of energetic kind of capability within us, right? And when we lean in there, it's like, wow, like I could do this for hours and hours on end. And you and I often have discussions that span like usually
hours and hours.
Exactly. And then we're done and we're like, oh my gosh, we were just on for 4 hours.
4 hours.
Like 20 minutes, right? And so because of that, though, it's where we recognize the constraint of time is, again, fictitious, right? It's a useful construct because it allows us to show up for meetings on time and connect with people at designated points in kind of this landscape. But beyond that, it's really fun because once you get into momentum, right? You start momentum, then it's just feedback, right? How can we be as open to the feedback as possible? And when you're feeling into like that health journey that we started on back in 2020, there were all sorts of things that were totally unrelated, seemingly, to your outward expression of health that were the big catalysts for you to just start losing weight and expressing yourself more and being more open to like sharing who you are with the world and showing up and being on camera, right? Like back then, like
Everybody used to hide.
Yeah, exactly, right? So there are things like that, right? That now is you like showing up fully and loving it. And again, there are certain times where we're still going to have that, right? It's never going to reach the point where it's like, hey, I just want to be out there all the time, like getting in the spotlight. Because for those of us that are doing very, very deep work, there are moments of introspection that are required, right?
And also even just your levels of sensitivity. I know how sensitive I am. I need space and time, and sometimes like I'm having a social break at the moment, and it's kind of, I need those like energetically, and also I'm having a big upgrade in me program, so that space and time, I'm like, I can't give any energy to socials. I can't give any energy to being visible in that way. I've committed to me podcast fortnightly, so I'm showing up and I'm doing this. But other than that, I have kind of come back a little bit, just because the sensitivity element.
Well, and I think for you, and we've talked about this, and people who are more open to like embracing fully the presence element, the intuitive sense, and that's one of the reasons why I love working with you so much, is because you have always had, in the entirety of our relationship, a deep sense of knowing, right? And there are certain things where you were very tapped into that early on, and then we just continued to allow that to flourish and come more to the forefront. And as you've done that, it's again just opened up a world of possibilities to you time and time again in every area of your life, right? There's no area that's untouched at this point, right?
No.
We've talked through so many different things, and now in your current present day reality, almost everything that we've touched on at some point is manifest, right? Like
business, relationships, health, all of it.
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that's really beautiful, is it allows for that to be something that is a side effect, right?
Yeah.
It's not like, hey, I got to drive. I got to make this happen. I got to make this happen. It's like, no, if when you get into alignment fully and you seek out those, like, this is me being me.
Yeah.
I'm not having to do anything extra. I'm not having to worry about what other people think. I'm just showing up, and I'm showing up presently and, divinely in tune.
Yeah.
That's where I think for you, some of the time, and me too, I prefer to be unplugged mostly, right? Part of the reason why we travel and do the things that we do this way is it allows for that constant recharge. I can go for a walk at any point and be in nature in seconds, right? And be like fully immersed in me getting into introspective work and like being present. And if it's cold water immersion in the wild waterway or something like that, then I can immediately get tapped back in to that intuitive nature and know that, like, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on in this external world around us all the time.
Absolutely.
And when we're working with people and very invested in them, that does have an imprint, right? Like, we feel what our clients go through and feel. And sometimes, I mean, like, it's funny because
and sometimes that's not talked about enough, by the way. That's not talked about enough about that. And I've seen some teachings which is you protect yourself and you switch off from it, but they don't realize, like, you're on the journey with them, and it doesn't work like that. Like, and I think there's some quite toxic teachings out there that say that, and disconnect, and it's like this and it's like that, but in the space, in the moment, like, of course you're tuned in, so you're feeling everything that they're going through. And I know when I run retreats, like, I'm in it with them, and I'm feeling every single thing they're feeling for the duration that we're together. And then you've got to look for your thing to unplug from. And what you've just said about the unplugging, I feel like that's how we become more tuned into our intuition, because our heart intelligence, the body, the soul, whereas the brain is highly programmable. So when you're not unplugged and in nature, then more often than not, you're around other people, you're listening to their programs, you're picking things up, your TV, radio, whatever that looks like. Just the brain's constantly getting, the phone, social media, the brain's constantly getting programmed by advertisements, everything it sees. So when we're in nature, I'd rather be programmed by, a tree or a bit of grass, a flower, than what we currently live in this world, or what we are getting programmed by. So I think that's important for us and the work we do, because that's what keeps us in our intuition and in our, heart intelligence, or the soul and the feelings, rather than just the, the survival, the brain, the programming.
I agree. Exactly. And that's the thing that's really amazing about kind of each person has their own way of connecting to that, right? And really finding what it is. So there's no one right way, just like anything, right? And I think that's something we both agree upon. And the other component is, we know that as a human organism, right, the technology that we're overrun by now is not something that our brains and our bodies were designed, right, like, and evolved or grew in order to, like, participate in, right? Like the level of frenzy that's available at all times. And I mean, like, you and I both have our phones on airplane mode. Like, there's no other things that can distract us right now. And I know certainly in the work that we do, that's something that is an agreement that we have with our clients as well. Like, hey, if we're with one another, we're fully with one another, right? Like, it's you're investing highly in your own growth and continued expansion and the things that we've decided to work on together. So while we're together, that's all that's there, right? We're not doing other things. We're not being distracted, and focus is like a superpower in today's world. Right?
I just want to mention that, because I worked with a coach in, I don't know, it was 2017, possibly. Female coach, huge reputation, should we say, in heart healing and work like that. And I remember working with her, and I had my camera on Zoom. She was in America. She had her camera off. And I was thinking, is she going to turn it on? What's happening? She didn't actually turn the camera on at all, but insisted I had mine on.
Mm-hmm.
Then a door went and there's a delivery. And she goes and says, I'll be back in a minute, and then goes off. And I thought about this afterwards, because, there's sometimes, I'm in a house, sometimes the dogs will bark. I've got a relationship with my clients. They can see me on Zoom. We're in something. If they're in some sort of trance-like state, which happens a lot, I'll press mute, and I won't even, I'll press mute so they can't hear what's going on this end, and that's that. But I was thinking about that time and it come up as I was updating some coursework the other day about this particular person and why I didn't get results, and I felt as a failure. Or it was something to do with me. I didn't get results, and I actually terminated working with her. And I felt like some sort of failure because of all of these testimonials she had, and what I was seeing on socials. And it was only a few days ago I realized about her lack of presence with me in that moment, her lack of acknowledgement or even seeing me. It made me not want to work with her no more. And then obviously I've resonated with other people. Some people might resonate with her because the techniques that she's trying, but for me it's pure presence and focus. Like anyone that can provide that for me, I get to do the work myself. Take me my partner, he said yesterday, he said to me, as a man, you want to fix everything and you talk, and I'm sitting here with solutions in my head. He said, and I have to stop myself from saying what those solutions are. He said, because you'd always figure it out yourself. He said, you just like to bounce it off me. And then you'd have your own solutions. He said, and I'm trying to get used to that because I'm used to just coming forth with a solution. Right. And I think that's how some coaches work as well, not just, him saying because he's a man. I think that's how some coaches work too.
I agree. I think the thing that's really fun about this work is that as we move forward, there are two types of approaches. One is I'm the best coach in the world, and what I provide to my clients creates phenomenal results for them, right? Which is largely out there. I mean, there's a lot of big coaches with huge influences and people know their name and all that stuff, which are usually in that kind of vein. And it's not to say that it's bad, I'm not passing judgment, just acknowledging. And then there's the other side where I work with clients and support them in creating phenomenal results for themselves, right?
Yes.
And so for you and I, that's the way that we do work, right? We're not worried about being the one who is appreciated or acknowledged for the work that the clients go through and do, because most of the work they do is internal, right?
Yeah.
Most of the work that really leads to the true permanent transformation in people's life is work that is going on inside that client's brain, body, physiology, soul. Like that's what's like really the magic. And we're not the magician. They are, right? Like we're the facilitator and the supporter and the cheerleader, and love to do everything that we can to support that. And we're not the ones who take the credit, right? Because I know it's not me, right? Like all of the things that you've created in your life are yours to take ownership of, because that's the way that you've worked with me in the past, right? Like, hey, Sarah, and often you'll recall throughout our work together, I have to circle back and be like, no, Sarah, like you're the one who did the work, right?
Yeah.
You remember all of these things that have now shifted and transpired are because of you, right? Like you get to take and rightfully deserve all of the credit for the incredible life that you're now experiencing. And that's a big shift, right? Because it's easy to get sucked into the egocentric like coaching model where it's like, well, it's about me, like my personal brand is so important.
Yeah.
And there is some warranted like activity invested in that. However, at the end of the day, I feel like many of the coaches that I know that are coaching at the highest level and getting the highest level results and transformations for their clients are the ones that very few people know about, right? They work like you and I, largely through referral only, right? It's kind of like operating beneath the radar and work with super high level clients, but don't talk about it outwardly all, right?
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
it's different. And so for you, I think with what you've mentioned, I really love the aspect of giving people that permission to just lean in and say, hey, presence is the thing. And we talked about this in our most recent conversation as well. Presence, when it's true and authentic, and like really what you and I experience when we're in conversation with one another, is timeless, right? And 4 hours fly by, right?
Yeah.
And it's also where trust is developed, right? And for our work to really be what it can be requires that deep, deep trust, right? Where you know, like, hey, the definition of a client outside of a customer is just a transactional thing, right?
Yeah.
I create a customer in my business, they buy a ware from me, and then they're the owner of that ware. I've made some money, they've gotten something from me, that exchange is done. A client is someone who's in the care of the person who has, been hired, right? So for you and I, that's the way that we cherish that relationship between coach and client, is those people are in our care. And for them to be in our care, working on themselves intrinsically, they must trust us to a level that they often don't trust anyone else, right? Like there's things that you and I talk with our clients about and work with our clients on that they've never shared with anyone else ever in their life, and probably never will, right? And that level of trust is only available when they feel that presence, where they know you are in my care. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to make you less than. I'm here to uplift you. I'm here to support you. And anything that I can possibly do in that vein, that's why I'm here. That's why we're together, right? And that level of trust is hugely powerful, because the most incredible magic is available there.
And I think that's why I wanted to, do this podcast originally, because a lot of people don't know this. A lot of people out there don't know that they are the magician. They are the alchemist. The genie is within them. And every person has their own one. And, I know we're operating and working and we're showing them that. But, on a wider scale, for me, I feel like everyone should know their own power. And, this is why it's even more in my work. I'm growing it even more. Like, this is your power. This is who you are. And I know you're doing exactly the same. And I think this is a really important conversation to open up, because there is a lot of people in high positions that are like, I am the power. And, and we can say each other and acknowledge each other's power, but doesn't mean we're the only one with power. Whereas some people position themselves as more powerful. And then for them to be more powerful, the client has to be disempowered on some level. And I'm really passionate about this. Like, really, I've experienced it, being disempowered, in the past, and I know what that feels like, and worked with different mentors, and, I've had some phenomenal mentors, and I've worked with different ones where they've been like, no, this is your timeline. This is what's going to happen for you. This is this. And I remember you were just like, okay, what do you want to create? And then I remember you're also pointing things out that I never would have thought I'd created. Well, actually, this thing that was created was still your manifestation in a different form. And I was having to really get my head around, oh, I am creating all of this, and I am the co-creator of my reality. I am co-creating right now. And that, when you push that back onto me, and I needed a lot of evidence, because my ego really didn't want to acknowledge at that time. And, it took me time to get to the space. I was like, wow, this is the work. This is the actual work. And I'm now going to show other people theirs, because that was the most powerful shift in my life. you know, to know that and to feel that, and to have someone be so present, but also reflect back who I am, rather than tell me who I am. Remind me the things that I've done, and remind me the things that I've said in a timeline. So then I'm like, okay, yeah, there's that is me, isn't it? Yeah, that's been the most powerful process for me. And for me, why it was really important that I wanted to share this conversation, because I implore anyone who's going to go out there and choose someone to work with, to see, are you being empowered by that person? But also for the people themselves, anyone that's listening, don't allow your ego to get in the way when you're helping someone. And don't allow your need and desire for acknowledgement on some level get in the way. Allow that person to go through what they need to go through, with just you holding space in a way. And you know the way you see funny memes and stuff, and I see people saying, you know, holding space, oh, you know, it's another term for just sitting there and getting paid. But people don't understand the full power of holding space for another person.
Absolutely. Well, and I think you've said it beautifully in kind of really the expression of oneself is often difficult to look at directly, right? Because it is bigger, right? It's always bigger than we anticipate, right? And every single client that I've supported in experiencing something like that has like this reflexive moment of like, wait, there's a contraction, right? There's like, this is beyond me, right?
Yeah.
This is beyond who I'm used to being, and that identity shift that has to take place where it is. I mean, like you said, the brain is malleable, but it's malleable in a way that tries to revert back for like survival, right? Like instinctually, the brain is like, change is dangerous, right? Change is inherently something that can cause harm, right? So when you're moving beyond who you've previously been, it's so important to have that person there who is providing like that presence and acknowledging. And like you said, it's not, hey, I'm going to constantly be just building you up. It's like, I'm going to be reminding you of who you are now and who you've been all along. This isn't something that new. This is something that's old, that's been there, that's been present, that's been pressing in some way, right? Because that's the thing that you've developed more and more certainty of over the years, which again has led to so much of the things that you've now created and made manifest in your life. Is now the knowing that was always there is the knowing that you honor first, right? It's not there trying to like, okay, how can I justify this, or how can I make sense of this, or how can I rationalize this? It's like, no, I've had this, right? And you've had this for a long, long time. We've done inner child work, we've done generational work. Like there's all sorts of things that we've done where for you, you've like really taken full ownership of like, I am powerful, right? And I'm okay with being powerful. And I'm powerful. And how does that work in a relationship with a partner and all of those dynamics? And you've gotten the opportunity to really like lean in and find yourself more and more. And the more that you've found yourself, the more that you've embraced yourself, right? And that's the beautiful element here. Is I've found that as long as that is something that you have someone in your life who's willing to be present with you and who's not threatened by your growth and your continued expansion, then it's amazing, because that's where those feedback loops become like, hey, I don't have the wand. I'm just making sure that you're aware that you do. And when you wave it, it is truly miraculous, right? And it's so much fun to bear witness to, because look at all of the ripple effects that have come from that, right? Look at how many more people you've supported and expanding their own lives and expanding their own businesses and serving the world in a more profound way because of you leaning in and acknowledging, I am really that powerful, right? The work that I do is special and is meaningful and needs to be experienced by more people, not because you need to be filthy rich and have like as much financial abundance as you could ever want, but because it's what leads to the collective shifting, right? To more and more people looking at this type of work from a different vantage point and understanding that, presence, connection, like real, like caring and even love in this work is what allows for this sort of reflection to take place. And when it does, I mean, it's not filled with effort, right? It's filled with expression and experience. And then when you see it and you're like, wait, like many of the things that you and I have discussed is like, well, that was too easy. It should have been harder based on all of my prior experience.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, maybe not, right? Maybe it can be far more in flow and far more you feeling like generative in the way that you work and the way that you approach like service to others because of it being truly your own. You're not trying to play by someone else's rules because those constraints are truly that, right?
Yeah.
If you have a hose and there's water flowing through it and you kink the hose and place a constraint on it and say, you must go that direction, even though you want to flow this direction, there's only so much fluid that can go through that.
Yeah.
Right. And as energetic beings, that's the way that I like to think about it for my clients as well, is they're twisted and contorted and kinked all over the place with regard to their flow of energy because of all those other external constraints that other people have placed on them. And when those release and you remove them, it's just like, wow, like this is so much different and so much more enjoyable that I didn't realize life could be this great. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. I love that analogy because I feel like that is a lot of people that I not just work with, just people that I'm around and I see, just friends, family, anybody. And that is one of the things that I've noticed with, the energy, their flow of energy. There's a disruption, and it's the disruption is a constraint coming from somewhere or a manifestation coming from something for them to acknowledge something that they haven't previously acknowledged. And, the more in tune we get with our body, the more constraints we remove, the more flow. And that is, for our work as well, because I know, see, I'm doing it. I'm knowing, I'm 100% certain, but I do know when I'm working with someone, it's, if I try and follow the rule book of what I've been taught in a modality, it detracts from the inner voice that's telling me it's this, go this way, ask them this, do this. And I always know that when I mess up by going with the framework, it's never as powerful. They never get the powerful release because the inner voice, for me, it's in commune with their higher self, their inner voice. So it knows what they want. So you're like tuning in like a radio station to the frequency of what they need by being present. Whereas they might have disruptions, so can't tune into that themselves. So that's like that analogy you used sums up perfectly, like the work I do, the work you do, and the work we need more of in the world as well.
I love that. I agree. I mean, it is really like tuning into a radio station and like having that insight and really acknowledging that like at the higher levels of being, we're not separate, right? Like there is no separation. So for that to be something that we make peace with, and it can be scary at times, but like we talked about, if you're not doing the work that you need to have some level of grounding and like being present to yourself and acknowledging that it's not always enjoyable, right, to just tap straight into the collective because of I mean, talk about real chaos. I mean, 6 kids is one thing, but the collective of people who are stressed out and chronically fatigued and living other people's lives, it's not a lot of like real happy, joyful people out there, right?
Well, so if you remember, that happened to me in 2015, I think. It was why we originally connected, or maybe it in 2014. And I was literally sat on my sofa. I always remember I was just about to eat a vegetable curry. I'd sat on my sofa and the room just disappeared. If you remember, the room just disappeared. And I was like, what is going on? And, you know, from a scientific point of view, I had all these explanations, or psychotherapeutic, this, and this. And you were like, no, it's the field, you're tapping into this field, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, at the time, obviously, I panicked because, you know, the room's disappeared, and I felt like I was in space. And I was like looking, and the only way I could describe it was, there's a sea of energy. I'm plugged into this sea of energy and I don't know what to do. So then I started getting anxiety. But the anxiety didn't come first, and I was disassociating. The anxiety come as a consequence. I didn't know what to do, because my reality as I knew it had shifted, and my lens had shifted. And I felt everything, and it shook me up for days. And then now, like, that's a big part of the work I do. I just sit and go into that field. But if I didn't have you at the time to say, oh yeah, that's this, and that's where manifestation happens, and that's, you know, all of these different things, I actually take my clients to that space and they love it, you know. And it's interesting because, you know, all the things that I was getting told at the time that it could have been, which were bad things, if I'm being honest, you know, or I'm mentally ill or something, or, you know, it's this physical reaction in my body, I'm stressed, whatever the things I was getting told. And then a different perspective, because everything is perspective in reality, isn't it? You know, perception is reality. So someone's perception, oh, that's that, and that's negative. And then another perception that I took on board from someone I trusted. And then now it, you know, in that space is where I can just tune in and like get download information. I can be like, okay, this is my next step in business. Oh, this is what I should be doing. Oh, this is how I support my client next. Oh, this is what I do next. So yeah, that I wanted to talk about, you know, that collective energy, because that for me was gold, but monitored and guided. So I'm choosing what to tap into, what frequencies, when I'm in that space as well, rather than just picking up on, you know, war and everything else that's going on.
Right. Exactly. Well, and I think that's the part that's really amazing about a lot of this. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was thinking about that experience in particular before we had this discussion. So it's interesting because, and I think we've talked about it before, I've had times where I really, really enjoyed sensory deprivation and like float tanks and things like that, for exactly that reason, because it's just like you just go into a meditative state, and it makes it very easy to go to greater depths than most people are used to going to when there is some physical embodiment present. But with what you had expressed to me, and we had, so I remember the conversations about it as well. And it's like, well, you know, the void is something that most people don't fully appreciate when they experience it. And for you, you're being invited there with explicit purpose. Like you're creating this experience for yourself. And then when you did shift your perception of it, right, it was like, okay, there's no need to be fearful here, right? This is kind of something that can allow you to really be more and more present to something that's free from all the other bullshit, right? Like at the end of the day, there is no conditioning there. There is no body there. There is no brain there. It's like, this is truly just the energetic field. And so for you, that was, I think, a big turning point. And I'm happy that we get a chance to dialogue about it a little bit, because everyone has a different experience of it, right? Like, and we've done work about, you know, some of that in kind of time since. But for most people, when they start to acknowledge that it is something that can be chosen, right, where you can choose into it, the thing I think is very powerful about that is the other thing that does not exist there is judgment, right? Yeah. Because for us, and like, as we kind of go through this, we're always thinking about like, well, this is good or this is bad, or, you know, we're conditioned to be good people, right? And make good choices and all of that. And at the end of the day, who decides, right? Like who's making that choice as to whether, well, this is deemed good and this is deemed bad. And when we're in that state of like removal of all of that, it's again where we're totally free from constraint. I can just be present to what is. And that's where, you know, in quantum physics, we talk about infinite possibility across and through time. That's what's there. It's like, hey, there's no timeline there. Like there's no, the construct of time is removed, right?
Yeah.
So it's really crazy because when you lean in and you recognize, I mean, often, and it helps to have some creative visualizations when you're first practicing. But I think for both of us, that's really where we do a lot of the work that we do, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I actually shared that experience with one of my friends, and as I went for a holistic treatment off, and I was like, okay, I'm going to share this now because I'm not going to look nuts. So because we'd had the conversation, and I told him, and he was like, "What? You literally just sat down and it happened?" And I was like, "Yeah, I was just about to eat me dinner." And he was like, 20 years I've been meditating to get to that space. And I've had a glimpse of it once after 20 years. And I'm just like, oh, okay. I just thought that it was just a space. I said, but I didn't choose to go to that space. And I probably wouldn't have chose ever to go to that space. So instead I was thrust into that space. But I realized in that moment, oh, okay, this is actually something to embrace then. It's not something to run from, and I've had similar. I know we haven't got time because we go on for 4 hours, but I've had other experiences where I have left my body and I've been like spinning and going into spaces, and I thought, is this bad? And I remember an old mentor, she didn't have any experience of it, so she was like that to me. It could be a walk-in taking over your body. Don't go into that space. Don't do this. But my intuition was like, this is something positive. This is a spiritual experience. People are writing books about this. This is, and it's just happening. Let me experience it or explore it. But sometimes the fear took over, so I'd shy away earlier on. Whereas that's the difference between us working together in the empowerment and being empowered, knowing that as you say, you have got the magic wand, then it's helped me embrace and go into it. And then that's alchemized who I am, and then alchemized my work as well.
And again, it's another tool, right? Like it's an acknowledgement, right?
Yeah.
And when you're there and you're present, and it's funny, I think it was in 2020, you had been exploring some plant medicines, and I believe it was San Pedro when you had some very interesting exposures to the weather, right? And very explicitly. Do you recall that?
That's happened since, by the way. I've moved clouds and everything since, and
right?
I've got witness to that. But it's yeah, I remember.
Right. So those sorts of things, again, when you're very explicitly experiencing the true power that's inherent, right? And it's like, wow, like that was not possible moments ago, and now it is, right?
Yeah.
That's where the magic lies, and that's where it's so much fun to do this work.
Yeah.
Because being there and like sharing in that with someone, and really like just being present for those moments. I mean, you and I both know, like it's when we're doing the work, we're totally focused and present, and like that's the only thing that's there. And when we're not doing the work, there's still a level of connection, right? I can't tell you the number of times where one of us reached out to the other because we had been thinking about one another only moments before or the day prior and things like that. And so there's that level of kind of just appreciation for the way that the field works, and that the investment of energy across time, space, all things is still meaningful, right? And that's the part that's nice, is when you and I do work with our clients, we're not prepping for it and like spending 3 hours and like writing up like, hey, here's what we have to accomplish, or doing a bunch of notes and review afterwards. Like I often take notes with clients, and I often like really love like kind of making sure I'm aware of those flashes of insight that I experience through them most often, right? Where you're feeling it internally, I'm feeling it with you, and it's like, there's something more here. Let's go down that path. And it's crazy because then we're still there, right? Like even clients that I haven't worked with for years, I'm still supporting, right? Like I don't ever stop supporting people, right? And that's the thing that's really fun, is when you understand the energetics here, there's no need for that, right? Like you're kind of there as the kind of, silent supporter, energetically, allowing people to continue the work that you've started with them, or that they've continued beyond you and without you. And it's one of the things that we've often talked about before, where this type of coaching approach doesn't lend itself particularly well to permanent coaching relationships, because there's a certain point where it's like, oh, everything that we had planned on working together on is done, right? You've accomplished. So those sorts of things are different, because it's not like, hey, we have to work with one another for the rest of our lives because you're reliant on me entirely. That's not the work, right? The work is no, like, I'm intentionally working to remove myself from any need, right? You don't need me. You've never needed me. However, there have been times where it was useful for us to be in very close relationship to support some of the times where you were ready for real, like, rapid growth and expansion. And that's where there's like that fine line for finding that moment where people are ready, because often people aren't ready. Like, there's many times I'll have an initial conversation with someone, and it's clear and apparent, like, hey, the type of work that we'll be doing is not something that you're wholly on board for yet. And that's fine, right? Like, it's okay. But when they are ready, and there is like that level of, okay, I'm committed to this. I don't know exactly how it's going to look. I don't understand how it's all going to work. And I don't care. I think it's going to be worthwhile. Then it gets to be really fun, because then we're kind of more or less entering the void together, right? Like, hey, let's explore this. Let's see what possibilities are out there for you that you can at least dabble in and have some experiences with. And then based on those experiences, you either know, or, you're going to learn quickly, like, these things are for you or not, right? And that's the fun part, is, kind of encouraging people to be there and be present to just everything that's really possible, because everything is.
It is. And thank you, Brandon, for today. It's been amazing. I'm going to put in the show notes, if anyone wants to contact you and, and explore this further, and see what you're doing, what you've got coming up. And just thanks for coming on and sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, and, discussing what we have.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's a very fun conversation, and my hope is that the people who listen do have some value that they can immediately act upon, right? Like, there's been some actionable things here where I think you can immediately leverage some of what we talked about to better your own life and better the lives of your clients if you're in client work. So, have fun with it, right? And explore, enjoy, and, let us know. Sarah and I love hearing about, the transformations that take place as a result of these types of conversations. So
absolutely,
it'd be great to hear that.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to the Genius Alchemist podcast. If this episode has ignited your curiosity or inspired you in some way, then I encourage you to subscribe and share with friends. For those that want to stay in the loop and be the first to know about future episodes, special offers, and free resources, make sure to check out the link in the show notes. By joining my mailing list or reaching out through that link, you'll have exclusive access to all the latest updates and ways that you can connect with me. I look forward to sharing more inspiring stories with you all in future episodes.